Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So today's pod, we talked to Dr. Jan, and I'm so sorry, Dr. Jan, if I say your name wrong, Wasowicz. And she was just, oh my gosh, we had so much fun. We had so much fun going, not necessarily going into this, but in the actual interview itself, because she's just so personable and likable.
Oh, yeah. And she's got so much knowledge that she brought to us. I learned something new. I always learn something new from all of these experts. But she actually was talking about how she's a speech language pathologist, and she was talking about all the ways that the dyslexic person or just a language learner needs to go through the process to be able to read.
Absolutely.
And I was impressed to hear about how half of people identified with dyslexia have a developmental language disorder.
It makes sense. And I think about, because we know that dyslexia exists on a spectrum. And I think about all my kids that some of them come in with good language background, good language processing, and then some of them don't. But they have they're actually a little better at maybe some of the things like decoding and encoding. And then you have that bottom quadrant where they have both, difficulty with language processing and poor decoding and encoding. So I thought it was really a very, very informational podcast that we just did.
Yeah, she has charts. She referenced charts and all kinds of articles. She just was fascinating.
So the hope is that we can get our webmaster to put up some of those charts so that you can see this.
Yes.
But let's talk a little bit about Dr. Jan. So she has, with PhD, CCC, SLP, BCS, CL. I only know SLP and PhD. Those are the only ones I know. But she has more than 40 years experience as a language literacy and learning specialist, and she's worked with students who have language-based reading, writing, and spelling problems in a variety of educational settings, including public schools and private practice.
She's authored articles appearing in scholarly journals, is the inventor of the original Ear Aerobics software, and is an author of the SpellLinks products, all of them, and is the lead moderator of the esteemed SpellTalk multidisciplinary professional listserv.
If y'all haven't been on SpellTalk before, you should, because it's great to wake up in the morning and have that in your email and read over it. And it's got some huge names that are responding, and you feel like you have a front row seat with some of these huge names.
Yes.
So Dr. Jan is an ASHA-certified Illinois licensed and Florida licensed speech language pathologist and an ASHA board certified specialist in child language. And she holds a professional educator's license with multiple endorsements from the State Teacher Certification Board of Illinois. She maintains a private practice in Illinois via telepractice and in Florida serving students with oral and written language disorders.
So she got to move from Illinois to Florida is what I learned.
Yeah, I think we need to go to Florida.
Yeah. We could take the show on the road.
We would love that. I would love that.
Let's go, Amy.
Let's do it. Okay. So coming up is the podcast with Dr. Jan Wasowicz. And I'm sorry, Dr. Jan, I'm mutilating your name, but we're so excited to present this.
Yes,
so
enjoy
it.
Hey there.
Hi,
We are the
Dyslexia Duo.
Each week, we sit down with amazing people, including top researchers and experts in dyslexia, powerful advocates, affected individuals, and more.
Together, we break down the myths, share real stories, highlight research and strategies to advise our listeners about this prevalent learning disability.
Come join us. Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So today we have a very exciting guest. I've followed her for a few years when I was still working in public education. We have Dr. Jan, and I put a pronunciation guide next to your name, Wasowicz with us today. And if I said it wrong, you feel free to correct me. And just for our audience, we have a very diverse audience. We have parents, we have teachers, we have other educators, we have practitioners, we have therapists, we have QIs, we have admin, we have
policymakers.
Policymakers, decision makers, and we're global. So in a very short time, because we've only been doing this since June, and it's kind of taken off a lot. Yeah. So we're very excited that you're here with us. Could you introduce yourself to our audience today?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. And I pronounce my name Wasowicz, but please call me Jan. And I'm really impressed by what you've accomplished so far and the diversity of your audience, which I think is huge. I'm a big fan, as you know, Amy, if you've been on SpellTalk, I'm a huge fan of multidisciplinary discussions and collaborations. So I'm just thrilled to hear about your diverse audience. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. So if people, before we start, what is the name of your website? And then, of course, your SpellTalk, if people want to kind of look it up and listen and cruise the internet while they're listening to the pod.
Yeah, so SpellTalk is the listserv. It's free. I think we're in our 18th year. We're getting close to 20 years. It's again, multidisciplinary discussion group, professional discussion group. We have parents who lurk, and we're happy having parents who lurk, but only professionals can post. And we've been blessed by having some of the biggest names in the field be on there and contribute. So we've got some pretty major researchers on there. And you can just search for SpellTalk, all one word, and get yourself signed up. Again, it's all free, always has been. And SpellTalk is the listserv I moderate. The company that I'm the founder of, and we have a suite of products, that's SpellLinks. So it's spell-links. And you could go either to spell-links.com, or Learning by Design is also the name of our company. We're actually registered in 2 different states, and so we go by both SpellLinks, which is where we're registered, how we're registered in Florida, and Learning by Design is how we're registered and incorporated in the state of Delaware. So either one, spelllinks.com or learningbydesign.com.
Awesome.
You sound like a busy lady.
Yeah, yes, wearing a lot of different hats, staying busy. Yeah,
Awesome.
Love it.
Very good.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what led you to the career you're in today?
Yeah, so I'd like to say that I came into literacy, which really is what I do right now, is about reading, writing, and spelling, everything I'm doing, and I can talk more about that. But I came into literacy the way all of us do, the way our students do, and that's through oral language or spoken language. So I am a speech language pathologist, and in my very, very early part of my career, I worked exclusively with children who had speech language disorder, which is now called developmental language disorder. It's been called specific language impairment. It's different names, but basically a disorder in their spoken language. And so that was the beginning part of my career. And I'll tell a story a bit later, because I know we have a talking point on something, but I eventually moved into literacy, and then took all of my clinical training to develop products. My first company was Ear Aerobics, for those who have been around a while. And that was to take all of my clinical training, put that into software programs to teach phonological awareness skills at the time. And that was in the 90s. That company was acquired by Houghton Mifflin, and I started my current company, which is Learning by Design, SpellLinks. And now the focus is on reading, writing, and spelling. So we've gone beyond phonological awareness, which we'll talk about. We need to move beyond phonological awareness. And so that's kind of what I've done. But we know that spoken language, I know you know that, and I know many of your audience members know, spoken language is the kind of the anchor for literacy, for reading, writing, and spelling. So I really came in with that anchor. That's my original training and expertise. And then throughout my career, I have shifted over to the focus on literacy and never gone back, because I just love it so much.
So how would then, thinking about you going into this mode where you loved literacy and it kind of, that's your driver right now. I know you're familiar with dyslexia as well. So how would you describe dyslexia for our listening audience?
I follow what's called the Quadrant model, and people can search for the Quadrant model. I can hold up the picture, but I know we're not doing video. But the Quadrant model, which was developed by several researchers, Tiffany Hogan, there's so many names here, Bishop, Snowling, Hugh Katz, Weismer. There are a lot of names that are attributed to the Quadrant model. And basically the Quadrant model looks at literacy and looks at language and puts individuals into 4 squares, right? Quadrant. And there's the typically developing spoken language, typically developing written language. Those are our typically developing students, right? Then we have a group of students who have typically developing spoken language, but struggle with that decoding and encoding of the word, right? The spelling and the reading at a word level, really. It's the encoding, decoding automaticity with that. And so that group is defined as the dyslexic group. Okay? Then we have another group of individuals who they're fine with their encoding and decoding of words, kind of their foundational reading, spelling skills, but they have a deficit or struggle in their spoken language skills. So they have what is called developmental language disorder. And just like any other skill or area, everything's kind of on the spectrum. Those who are the most severe will be identified as developmental language disorder, but certainly there are students who have weak oral language, spoken language skills. And these skills interfere not only with the comprehension of spoken language and the expression of your ideas in spoken language, but they also greatly impact and interfere with your comprehension of reading comprehension, and your ability to write. So that's the mixed group. That's the DLD group. And then we have a 4th quadrant, which is they have both. They have dyslexia and they have developmental language disorder. So again, 4 quadrants: typical, developmental language disorder, dyslexia, and mixed dyslexia, developmental language disorder. Now, in terms of how many students have developmental language disorder, we don't have concrete numbers. It's called the hidden disorder because it goes undiagnosed. Sometimes for your entire lifetime, you may never be diagnosed. But it's believed that 2 children in every classroom, 7 to 10% of children have developmental language disorder. So that's about 2 children in every classroom. But now if we just look at the dyslexic population, half of individuals with dyslexia also have developmental language disorder.
Wow. And you know, that used to be part of our state we've changed the definition for the state of Texas a while back, but I remember seeing that developmental language disorder being part of the definition and not quite understanding what that was, you know, but I'm glad to hear now what that is. That makes so much more sense because as you're saying it, I'm trying to form these connections and I'm like, oh, that's what that is. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
So what comes first, the DLD diagnosis or the dyslexia diagnosis?
Well, fortunately, dyslexia diagnosis is people are getting identified, right? And that's a great thing. But we don't have enough awareness, first of all, of DLD, nor do we have enough tools in the hands of educators to identify. There is no DLD screener mandated, no universal screener. There are people working on that. There are groups working on that. There are screeners available. The TILS, which is the Test of Integrative Language and Literacy Skills, that's an assessment that is used to identify and tease out. In fact, one of the authors on the TILS, Nicola Nelson out of Western Michigan University, she's part of the Quadrant model too. She's been a contributing author on the Quadrant model. So the TILS will help identify and tease out who has developmental language disorder, who has dyslexia, and who has the combination of both. So that's an assessment tool that speech language pathologists use. Now, that same author has a TILS screener. I don't know if it's called the TILS screener. It might be, but it's a screening tool. And it is a questionnaire screener, so it can be easily administered, takes just a few minutes, high specificity and sensitivity, which is what you want in a screener, to identify individuals, but children who have developmental language disorder. So we, SLPs in general, different groups are working very hard to help teachers become aware of DLD and the tools that they can use. And I think it's especially critical for those who work with students who have dyslexia, because half of your students with dyslexia have DLD. Yeah. So they need, different types of interventions. So you're going to only be able to take them so far until that DLD is identified and specifically teased out and remediated.
So the screener, just Because screener means all, so that would be anybody could administer that screener, but would it, or just the SLP administers the screener and then maybe the evaluation?
No, I'd have to look. I believe classroom teachers can administer that screener. Okay. I will share with you afterward, and you could put it in your show notes.
Yes.
An article that did a meta-analysis review of different screeners for DLD, and 3 of them rose to the top in terms of high specificity and high sensitivity, which is, again, what you need to have in a screening tool. Out of those 3, only one of them can be administered by classroom teachers, and that's the TILS screener. The other 2 require extra qualifications, either being a psychologist or a speech-language pathologist.
This is great information, because if you have a student, you know, and you refer them out to the SLP, and then you're also doing the dyslexia assessment and they qualify for everything, you get a complete profile of how that student learns, you know. And I know that we're therapists. We don't always just teach to a curriculum. We individualize it as much as possible. And I think that would be a huge help in understanding some of those other pieces besides the low-hanging fruit, like phonology, decoding, fluency. Those are all easy, right, to instruct in. At least for our population, it's easy to instruct in. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, the foundational skills, right, the decoding and the encoding. So if it's DLD is going to impact, you know, beyond the word level. So syntax,
semantics,
reasoning, semantics, reasoning, pragmatics. So there's a lot of higher order skills that, again, they interfere with the ability of that individual even to listen in a classroom and understand what is being spoke. So yeah, there's a real need and there's a real push for it right now. DLD and Me, that's all one thing. DLDandme.org is a website. That one is run by Tiffany Hogan, who's a leader. She's a speech-language pathologist, and she is really leading the cause on helping develop awareness. So DLDandme.org. The other one, I always forget the name of it, but there's one other one that, again, I can get to you for the show notes. There's another one for DLD awareness as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I will say, just as a side, so I am in private practice, and I didn't, in my introduction, I probably should have worked that in. So I've been in private practice my entire career. My very early part of my career, I was a full-time professor at university in the Chicagoland area. And then I was an adjunct professor at several universities, really for like 20 years or so. But during that time when I was adjunct, I then developed my private practice. And I was working initially with students who had just DLD, but now I work with students who have either just DLD, just dyslexia, or a combo. And because I'm in private practice, of course, I get a lot of parents calling referrals. And invariably, a lot of the students I pick up on my caseload have been receiving some type of dyslexia intervention at their school. And they've only, the parents will usually say something like, well, they made progress, but now they've plateaued, or they've improved in their reading, but not their spelling, or something, but basically there's still a problem. And invariably they get on my caseload, and almost all of them have developmental language disorder. And that is what's, kind of having them hit that wall. Some of them are not getting good speech to print instruction, and that's another reason why they're hitting the wall. We could talk more about that too.
Yeah,
it's really kind of fascinating, because you think about how it could open up our practices.
That's what I was just thinking too. It could totally change not just Melissa and I, but all the other dyslexia instructors, therapists, practitioners that are out there. It could really change how they instruct their students.
Yeah, having that information will help. So first of all, only SLPs can diagnose developmental language disorder, and state laws really restrict that SLPs are only qualified to treat DLD. But that doesn't mean there can't be things that you collaborate on. And now that you have your awareness of developmental language disorder, you have a better understanding of where to focus instruction. Or, if you're working hand in hand with an SLP, which I'm a huge, a proponent of, then she or he may be able to share some specific methods to help support what you're doing. But yeah, state licensing laws, and even insurance companies only recognize SLPs for providing DLD services, and state licensing boards only recognize SLPs for DLD services. And
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I remember when I was still working in public ed, I always looked to my SLPs when I get a new referral, because if I had a child that was attending with them, that was always a big red flag, okay, it could be dyslexia. And I can remember back in my early days when I've been doing this since 92, I can remember going to my SLP because she was teaching phonological awareness, and that wasn't something that was embedded in our curricula yet. And not yet. I mean, it was there. There's always been, not always, but I know of, you probably know better research than me, but I know of research for phonological awareness support back in the 70s, but and I didn't have it in my curricula. It wasn't embedded yet, so I wasn't aware of it because, again, 92, we didn't have the computers in our classrooms so that we could look things up, and get that support.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, I'm always going to celebrate anyone who's collaborating across disciplines. So I'm glad, you guys are doing that. But you reminded me about this story. I want to sneak in here. So in the 90s, you mentioned the 90s, I had a thriving private practice, but I was still only doing oral language, developmental language disorder, and working on speech production, right? And language as well, but the actual production of sounds with children who were mispronouncing sounds. And parents of my caseload, they were coming to me and saying, what are you doing with my child? Because all of a sudden, since they started services with you, their reading and spelling at school has improved dramatically. And I wasn't working on reading and spelling, but I knew the research, just like you did, Amy. It's been around, and I'm sure Melissa too. We've had research out there for decades and decades. So, and I knew of it because I'm tied into academia, and I was a professor for 20 years. And right around that time, so this is in the mid-90s now when this is happening for me, then the parents said, well, is there any software program that does what you do? Because, we'll bring them here once a week and they're making fabulous progress, but wouldn't it be great if they could also be on a software program as well? Then they'll be going off to Harvard in no time. So I didn't have children. I went down to the local store where they sold, at that time, it was CD-ROMs.
Yeah.
And this is the 90s, and CD-ROMs, the entire, we now call it edutainment because it wasn't really educational software, but the edutainment CDs fit in, all the CDs would fit in my office, your office. It wasn't that much, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, first of all, this is fluff, this is edutainment. I have the expertise in a lot of different areas. I'm just going to do this as a summer project. I'm going to put together a little software program. I had background in working with software and coding and everything. And long story short, that was in 1994, I believe, or 95. In 1996, I incorporated aerobics, cognitive concepts. And in 1997, we released Aerobics Step 1. That was my first software program. Nobody, as you said, Amy, no one in the schools was doing it. No one really, unless you were tuned into the research as you were, no one really knew about phonological awareness. In fact, when I was trying to raise funds from investors for my venture, they all said, well, no, there's phonological awareness, because they would go and talk to the schools and the principals. And either the principals or the administrators or the teachers would say, well, we already do that, meaning phonics. They didn't even understand
they didn't understand the difference, right?
Yeah. Or they would say, well, phonological awareness, we don't, what's that for? So we couldn't even raise money from investors because the investors wouldn't look at the research. They would only look at what the schools were telling them. Anyhow, so raised money from friends and family, got aerobics out there. And that was in 1997 when we released Aerobics Step 1 in June. It was in 1998 when NIH completed their 30 decades of research and released their report to Congress, and the National Reading Panel convened and put out the paper. And basically, Congress mandated that every child in every school must have phonological awareness instruction. Aerobics was the only product on the market.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Anyhow, and so that was really how I got into creating educational products, because of that experience. But it speaks to, the power of phonological awareness at that time. And just following the research, right?
Right. No, I can remember the first time I saw phonological awareness in action, I was like, I probably was doubting. a little bit because I was like, and the more I did it with students, the more it made me a believer. Now, interesting story. Okay, so this is a total aside. I remember aerobics. One of the campuses I worked at, I brought my son, who at the time was 5. So my son's on the autism spectrum. And it was mandated that all kindergartners and first graders go to the aerobics lab. So this is in 2004, 2005, something like that, right? And so he was hyperlexic, right? He saw the word a few times. Somebody had to say it out loud. He saw the word, heard it, he had it. He had like 1, 2 repetitions, maybe 3 repetitions, and he had it. But he had to go to the aerobics lab. Nonetheless, he had good decoding, good encoding, all of it. And he would get bent out of shape when it came to the screen with the clown with the balloon, that if he didn't do it in time, it would pop, because he hated, that was one of his things that would set him off, were popping balloons. And he's like, I hate it when the balloon pops and I just don't know what sound they're trying to, because that's not how he learned. That's not how he learned that, because he was very good at just right away understanding the whole word. It's a fascinating thing, the brain.
It is. And I'm sorry about cartoon balloons. We did hear from parents of children on the spectrum that balloons popping.
Oh God, he wasn't the only one. I just remember he'd be sitting out in the hallway outside a computer lab. I'm like, what'd you do now?
Yeah, no. So yeah, first of all, you all, I can't believe you all go back that far. None of you all look like that.
I have filters on. Filters.
Filters are good. We like filters. Anyhow, no, that's awesome. And hyperlexia. So when I was talking about the quadrant model, in some quadrant models, you're going to see the term hyperlexia in that square for the students who have very good decoding skills, encoding, right? Recognize the word. They only need a few exposures, but they don't have those higher order language skills. And very much individuals on the spectrum fall into that quadrant. Now, I have an argument with a colleague of mine in SLP. She wants to bring back the term hyperlexia to that square in the quadrant model. I personally like that they're calling it developmental language disorder, because I think many people associate the hyperlexia with individuals, for example, on the spectrum. And they forget that it could be other reasons why they're in that.
I was going to say, I feel like that would just pigeonhole a little bit more, whereas the other one is more of a broad definition.
Right. Yeah, it covers so many different areas.
So does a hyperlexic have developmental language disorder, or can they, or how does that work?
Yeah, typically, and we'll just take an example of typically on the autism spectrum, and I'm just going to talk in general because, of course, there are so many exceptions, but typically they are very good with the encoding, the decoding of words, but they have a deficit in the pragmatics. So pragmatics is an area of language. And if we have time, I hope we talk about the reading rope versus the language literacy network. One piece, when I created the language literacy network, one piece that was missing from the reading rope and is on the language literacy network is pragmatics, because pragmatics is one of many areas of language that feed into not just understanding and expressing spoken language, but understanding and expressing in written language. And that pragmatic piece is one area that is typically weak and needs specific attention in someone on a spectrum. Again, I'm brushing some broad strokes here, and they could have other higher order language deficits as well.
Interesting.
We could talk about the language literacy. I was actually looking at that graphic the other day. So in Texas, I know, I love it. I think it's very comprehensive. I was looking at it, I was like, oh, that's so much more involved and detailed. So I have, in Texas, all of our teachers in grades K through 3 have to do something called Reading Academy. And the Reading Rope was a major player in the Reading Academy. And for the gen ed teachers, that's good. They needed to have that exposure. They may have had it in college, but I doubt it. So they probably didn't have that exposure. But I remember went to an ALTA conference last year, and we're getting ready to have another one coming up here soon. And Dr. Hasbrook was talking at the ALTA conference, and she was actually talking about the reading rope. The Hollis-Scarborough reading rope was like 2000, 2001 or something. And she goes, actually, the simple view of reading was around before the reading rope, but the two, I'm blanking on Turner and Tunmer and Gow. Yeah, it was based off of the reading rope was actually kind of based off that, and they talked to each other about it and kind of made it a little bit more elaborate. But I almost feel like your phase 3 of the language literacy network, I feel like your graphic is like the third step of understanding everything that is involved with decoding, encoding, fluency, everything like that. So can you talk to us about, I kind of skipped on down, but let's talk a little bit about your language literacy network.
I am happy to. So Goff and Tunmer with the simple view of reading, it was based on a lot of research. I think they developed the simple view of reading around the late 80s, early 90s. And the reading rope, even though everyone quotes 2001, that was the first date it was published with a copyright. It was actually hand-drawn in that same exact form by Dr. Hollis-Scarborough in 1992.
Is that black and white one that I see sometimes? Okay, because I see the color one more often now, but okay.
Yeah, the black and white, hand-drawn, and so she drew that in 1992 based on the same body of research that Goff and Tunmer put forth the simple view of reading, right? So we're going back 30 years now. And when I started working on the Language Literacy Network, it started through a conversation with a group of colleagues called the PeaceNEX. And we kept talking about how everyone's talking about reading, no one's talking about writing. We need a writing rope instead of a reading rope. And I said, well, no, we have a writing rope. Joan Sedita, right. I know she was the guest. Yeah. I said, what we really need is we need a reading writing rope, right? Because we know from the current research, here we are 30 some years later, we know from the current research how integrated reading and writing are and the bidirectional relationship. So that was kind of what gave me the spark to create what eventually became the Language Literacy Network. And when you look at it, someone calls it a neuro-linguistic schematic. It's an illustration that is representing, based on our research understanding, the various language processes, skills that are part of reading and writing at the foundational skills level, as well as that higher order comprehension expression of spoken language level. And it's representing them. I know we could put this in your show notes, but the concept here is that these are neurons or centers of the brain that are processing specific skills or information, and they're all integrated and talking with one another. So it's very functionally connected. This is the term from neuroscience research. We have functional connectivity within the higher order skills, the foundational skills between reading and writing. All of this is a very integrated circuit. And so that's what this is representing, is the integrated circuit of the brain in the Language Literacy Network. So when I was working on it, I wanted to bring it up to date. So again, the reading rope is from 1992. Well, much of that research has withstood the test of time 30 years later. So you'll see a lot of similarities because same research, same understanding. But there are a lot of really key differences because it's 30 years later and we have so much more research. I mean, one of the obvious differences is we have writing instead of just reading. We also have, this is a really big one. If you look at the foundational skills on the reading rope, sight word recognition has kind of its own entry there. But we now know that sight word recognition is a byproduct of decoding and encoding, but the phoneme graphing mapping, and through that becomes sight recognition. So in the Language Literacy Network, sight recognition is shown not as a skill area that needs to be addressed, but rather as the byproduct of doing good encoding, decoding instructions. That's one big one. Also on the reading rope, it doesn't represent morphology. We now have so much research that supports how important morphology is for reading words, spelling words, and the integration of phonology, orthography, and morphology, or what's called POM, phonology, orthography, morphology, and meaning. Triple word form, Virginia Berninger has published a lot on the importance of integrating sounds, letters, meanings, or phonology, orthography, morphology, and meaning. And so that's represented there in of course, the spelling piece is represented there because writing is represented. Pragmatics is missing from the reading rope. But this is huge. And I'm not talking just about the spectrum population. I'm talking about developmental language disordered children who don't necessarily understand perspective or internal states of feelings or purpose. What is the purpose of this? So our main idea, all of those start to fall into pragmatic skills. So pragmatics got added. I think that probably covers the main differences, but bottom line is it represents the current body of research, whereas the reading rope represents 30 years ago.
If I wanted to use this with my trainees, do I have your permission to use your language literacy network?
100%. So we make it freely available, and any one of your listeners can go on our website and download it. We do ask you to sign off just saying that you're not going to use it for commercial purposes. But yeah, in fact, a lot of university faculty have adopted it into their curriculum at the pre-service level. So it's now part of language literacy courses.
Oh, perfect.
Reading courses, so a lot more professionals or professionals to be are being exposed to it. I'm really excited to say that in 2024, it was adopted by the state of Illinois Board of Ed.
Wow.
And it is part of their comprehensive literacy program. You'll find the Language Literacy Network on page 30, and they really recognize it and the role of spelling and writing especially. So yeah, but please, we're trying, just like the reading rope is kind of out there. I mean, most teachers have at least seen it. Whether they have a deep understanding, that's another issue or question. But most teachers have seen it. But again, it's 30 years old. We have to get the Language Literacy Network out there, and that's why we're making it freely available.
I love the change. I love the transition. I love all the additional pieces that have now been added to it because it does flesh it out even further than, I thought the reading rope was great, but then I saw yours and I was like, well, holy cow. That's just so much more.
There's a lot more to it, right? Yeah. And, and maybe the reading rope when in pre-service teaching programs, that might be a good place to start.
Right.
In fact, I know of professors who will have actually 3 now. They'll have the reading rope. And okay, well, this is the big picture. Then they fill it in with the Language Literacy Network.
Oh.
And then active view of reading. That's what it's called. Cartwright and Duke. And if you compare side by side the active view of reading and the Language Literacy Network, the language pieces are all there. What they have separately in their model is executive function, self-monitoring, mostly executive function kinds of skills, attention. And yes, that's hugely part of it. But when I created the Language Literacy Network, I just wanted to focus on the language because you can have your EF skills and still not have reading and writing if you don't have language. You have to have the language because at its core, reading and writing is language.
Absolutely.
But anyhow, yeah, so some professors are presenting all 3.
I think, like you said, introduce them maybe with Scarborough, and then as they progress, like my trainees have to go for 2 years with me, and as they get to those upper level coursework with me, start to present the complexity that's involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything when we first kind of learn the basics, right? And then we start to fill it in. Yeah, I think that's great.
Wonderful.
As you guys were discussing, I think that I've noticed informal observations through the therapist side, working with the kids. I've actually kind of noticed a decrease in pragmatics with students. I almost attribute it to like around COVID time. I kind of see a decline in that area. I don't know if you've seen something like that or if you can give us a reason why maybe we're seeing more of that.
Yeah, well, we could always point to social media as well. But I'll leave that. I do think that's a part of it for sure. But there's actually been several studies looking at this out of the speech language pathology world because it comes down to, spoken language skills, essentially. First of all, the number of referrals that we've seen for children with speech language delays skyrocketed like hundreds of percent after COVID. And they do attribute it to children not being in more social environments, whether it was daycare, preschool, or regular school. And, so that's actually the main one. Then, of course, there's the whole device piece as well. But there's been a huge increase in the number of children with speech language delays. And as we know, oral language is the anchor upon which literacy builds. And if you don't have that foundation, it's just even harder. But yeah, pragmatic skills, social skills, and yeah, not even, we're not talking on the spectrum, we're simply talking just having basic understanding of pragmatics. And these are things, as a speech language pathologist, we have seen students like this over the years. Now we're just seeing more of them.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, sometimes, and I'm not trying to point fingers by any stretch, but I think with social media being so prevalent, I think sometimes the devices take the place of the conversations that would typically have happened with parent and child, or like you said, daycare worker and child, that sometimes that has kind of led to some of this as well. That's just my informal. I'm not a doctor or anything, obviously, but that's just my informal observation.
100%. I mean, I get kind of angry when I'm outside and I see a young mother pushing her stroller, and she's just on her phone, not talking. I mean, that's language develops when you just talk to your child about whatever they see in their environment, whatever they're doing. You can never talk too much to your child. That's how language develops. And it's not happening as much. I think that's what you were referring to.
Yes.
Same thing when you go out to eat and you see the whole family, two kids on their iPads and the parents are on their phones. And I'm like, I'd give my right arm to have all of my kids sitting in front of me at the dinner table with their devices gone. That would be great. I mean, they're adults, so I'd give my right arm for them to come eat supper with me.
Yeah.
Truth, right?
I think this is a good place to talk about what the changes you've seen. You've been in the education area for a while. What are some of the changes, like we've talked about just now with devices, what are some of the other changes that you've seen come about? Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe it's just a change.
Yeah, well, one of the big ones, of course, was the whole mandating of phonological awareness instruction. That was a huge one. Although I have to say, sadly, here we are, that was mandated in 1998. There are still many, many classroom teachers and other interventionists who don't have phonemic awareness skills themselves and or not able to teach phonemic awareness skills. So yeah, we've come a long way, but in some ways we haven't. So
there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, of course, yes. And we talked about the whole social media, not so much social media devices and COVID, but I think one other big change is the one I think we're all aware of, which is kind of the fall of Lucy Calkins.
Oh, yes.
And the rise of science of reading. And I want to talk about science of reading, but that was huge. And we have to credit in good part Emily Hanford, who recorded the documentary series for American Public Media Radio. Great investigative journalism, great reporting. And she, not single-handedly, but she was a huge part of this change. And so, yes, the fall of Lucy Calkins, the whole language in general being looked at again. So now we have science of reading, and we have SOR, capital SOR, like the SOR movement, science of reading. And then we have what I'll call lowercase science of reading. We've always had science of reading, meaning research being done, usually in academic places, but research that tells us best practices, that teases it all out. We've had this research for decades and decades. It was what led to the mandating of phonological awareness instruction in the 90s. It's out there. So I think there's some misunderstanding of SOR, and now I'm talking capital letters, science of reading, as and it is kind of a movement. It's kind of coming into the vacuum, the space that's been left behind by the fall of Calkins. And there's a lot of good with it. There's a lot of good, but there are a lot of pieces missing as well. And I think rather than get on the capital SOR bandwagon, we need to just get on the lowercase science of reading, and I'll say writing, because you know I'm a huge fan of writing, and just be aware of research and stay informed as best as we can. And sure, it's a lot, and I can't keep up with all of it. And part of my job with SpellTalk is reviewing research abstracts and research articles. So, you know, it's hard to keep up with everything. also with the SOR, the movement, there is a bit of misunderstanding. I know some people incorrectly think that SOR is just about phonics, and it's not. However, some leaders in that capital SOR are more focused on reading, and in the past have been more focused on more the foundational skills. Not that they don't recognize the value of the other skills, but that's just been a focus, and that's shifting. So I think, I can understand why there's been some misunderstanding or misperception of what SOR is, but it isn't. And if you go lowercase, let's just go lowercase. The research that drives our understanding of how best to teach reading and writing, it's about all the language components, right? It's about everything in that language literacy network. And when I created the language literacy network, just like when Dr. Scarborough created the reading rope, it was based on the research. It wasn't just, some idea we had after having a couple of glasses of wine. So the research is there to support those pieces. So look at the research and don't just jump on a bandwagon.
No, I agree with that. And I know what you're talking about with the capital SOR because, of course, we have the National Panel Report from 2000 or something like that. It talked about the big five and it talked about comprehension. And I think, like we talked about earlier, the low-hanging fruit are the first three. And then, of course, morphology, vocabulary, and then they get to comprehension. But there's more to comprehension than instructing in the first four. Right. And I think that's where I love Language Literacy Network. That's where, because it's more comprehensive and it brings in all the other parts that's needed. But I know exactly what you're talking about, because my concern with talking about the science of reading is that people are just going to think it's these lower end skills and ignore all the incidentals that go. Yeah, thank you. With comprehension and writing and spelling and all that. I can see there's so much good, but because people don't fully understand it, the pendulum may swing back the other way again. Because they're saying, well, look at this. And you've seen this report, I'm sure, talking about how our students haven't scored. Was it a fourth graders?
Oh, the NAP?
Yeah.
Report,
Yeah. How, look, we've been doing science of reading and look how far they've plummeted, Well, okay, take that with a grain of salt, but we need to incorporate all of it. It can't just be those first few pillars.
Right. Yeah, no, that's just it. It's not one or the other, and we can't be swinging the pendulum every 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is. It is all the pieces of the Language Literacy Network, and they're all equally important. Yes, at certain parts, points in time and grade levels, you're putting a little more focus in certain areas, but you're not ignoring the others, and they all need to come together. And yeah, that's where I do think that there's a little bit of a shortcoming in the capital SOR. We need to understand that, take comprehension, but of course we know comprehension and expression, it's all important. Comprehension strategies are good. There's nothing wrong with teaching strategies, but if you don't have the language skills, if you don't have syntax, if you don't have prosodic competence, if you don't have morphological knowledge, you can't have strategies, right? Because you don't have the skill. A strategy is how to take your skill and apply it. But if you don't have that skill, how do you apply it?
Right.
So, okay, we'll get off our soapbox.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
So let's talk about who we met at IDA, Tumbleweed.
Oh, I love Tumbleweed's decodable books, and they're for striving readers in grades 2 through 6. My favorite thing about them, in addition to the storylines, is the inclusion of comprehension, spelling, and vocabulary activities.
Yes, and there's no guessing because they took out the visual distractions. They still have illustrations, but not right next to the print.
And Tumbleweed is easy to implement with any core or intervention program. Their teacher guides are jam-packed with multimodal approaches.
Check them out at tumbleweedpublishing.com. Hi, this is Amy Rodenroth, and as part of the Dyslexia Duo podcast team and owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services, I want to talk to you about my business. Our COUT-trained team offers expert virtual or in-person therapy located in Prosper, Texas, using proven dyslexia curricula like Take Flight, Build, MTA, Alphabetic Phonics, and Reading by Design. We also provide crucial independent evaluations and advocacy services. Don't wait. Empower your child today. Visit www.discoveread.com to learn more. That again is www.discoveread.com. Discoveread, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show.
So talk to me a little bit. I'm kind of going to jump back down to the Language Literacy Network because I think there was a few other topics I wanted to talk about there. I know we talked a little bit about the phonology, and then we also touched a little bit on orthography. Can you talk to me about those two pieces and how they connect together?
Yeah. And I have a little story there too. So back to aerobics, which was all about phonological awareness, right? That's all it was. And for those who might not know it, you would listen to a word and you would tap out how many sounds, for example, or you would hear at and you'd blend it together. It was PA in the dark, as it's commonly called now. Yes. Okay. So we released the first one in 1997, and then there was aerobics step 2 in 1998. And it was in 1999 or 2000, I was meeting with some faculty who were on our board of advisors. And they said, I remember this because we were walking back from lunch and we were in front of the 7-Eleven on Davis Street in Evanston, Illinois. And they said to me, Jan, there's research that they didn't call it PA in the dark, but PA in the dark is no longer supported by the research. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I just got these products out on the market. And what do you mean? And again, it's that academia. Things are in academia for a long time before they hit mainstream. Well, it's true. And this goes to what Melissa is asking. We now understand that developing phonological awareness skills and orthography awareness, or pattern awareness skills, they have a bi-directional relationship with one another. Teaching them together facilitates both ways. Now, there's a time and a place, and we as interventionists and clinicians know that there's a time and a place where you have to kind of put that print on the side and focus just on the PA piece. Right. But for me, it's like a 30-second piece, and then once they've achieved what I need them to achieve without the print, I layer that print back in. But only a good clinician interventionist knows how and when to do that. More broadly speaking, we need to be integrating phonemic awareness, phonology with letters. There is a bidirectional relationship. One facilitates the other. But I also want to add, because this is critical, we also know that meaning and morphology has to be that third piece. And I always would say to my students, you need 3 pieces of glue to stick a word in your brain. You have to be thinking about those sounds, and you have to be knowing those letters, but you also have to know the meaning of the word. Because if you don't have all 3 pieces of glue, sounds, letters, and meanings, it's not going to stick in your brain. And this is what we know from the research. In order to develop a robust lexical storage of a word, it has to be an integration of sounds, letters, meaning, phonology, orthography, morphology, semantics. So, and they all functionally integrate with each other. And it's when you teach them in a functionally integrated way, you're developing those brain pathways in an integrated way.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of take us on a dive then. So when we're introducing some of the most basic concepts, there aren't a lot of words that can be created with such limited introductions of the short vowel I and E that the kids can actually unblend and encode as well for spelling. So we have a very limited amount of words. Say, for example,
it's very controlled.
Yes, it's very controlled. And you might see the word pip or whatever, and they don't know that meaning. So do you just recommend, explaining what pip might mean? Is that kind of how you go about that process?
It depends on where you are in that task. If they see, you said if they see a word pip, do you mean like in a book?
No, just like if I'm doing a reading practice page with them and they're practicing on decoding a word and then blending it together, and they're doing a reading practice page where they've got several different words that are similar in pattern. So if they come to a word that they don't know, but they've decoded it and then they've blended it together, then do we instruct in what that word means? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so this is a great opportunity for oral language and semantics and meaning and everything else to come together. So pip might be an odd word for me to give an example on.
I have one that actually I wrote it down just now because I'll tell my story after we finish. But I had, when we got into syllable division with 2 syllable base words that are in a closed syllable. And one of the words one of my kids had to read was pipkin, right? Pipkin.
Oh, pipkin. What's a pipkin?
I didn't know either. He asked me, and I didn't know either. And we looked it up. It's a small apple.
Okay. So great opportunity, learning moment for both the student and the teacher. So let's assume you knew pipkin when they encountered it. We learn oral language through just discussing. No one has to sit us down and teach us, right? When we were all children and when our children were children, they just engage in conversation, and that's how they learn. That's how they develop vocabulary and syntax skills. So that's all you have to do is have a discussion, pipkin. Okay. So pipkin came up. First I'd ask them, do you know what pipkin is? Probably not. Well, I love these days with the internet. I will get a picture up. Well, here's a pipkin, right? And what is the pipkin? Did you say it's an apple?
Yeah, it's a small apple.
Okay. So this is a pipkin. Have you seen a pipkin before? Well, I've seen apples before. Okay, well then how is a pipkin, which is an apple, how is it different from other apples? And now they can develop their understanding of the nuances and different meanings and different categories and subcategories of apples. I mean, just talk about it, because that's how children learn language.
Another word would be ASP, because, when we first teach in like MTA or alphabetic phonics or something like that, the scope and sequence for the first schedule is ITPNSAS. That sounds like ZLDFH. And so you only have 2 short vowels and a few consonants, and they come across the word ASP and they go, what is that? And I'm like, and I've even said to some of my older kids, Cleopatra and the asp, and they're like, what are you saying? I'm sorry, we'll go backwards.
Yeah. No, I would have pictures ready at the ready, especially having the internet is so easy to do. And then I would talk about it and have them use that word in a sentence, because that's going to help really secure that. So, after you've looked at it and asked, okay, well, can you use asp in a sentence? And here's a great opportunity to work on oral expression at the sentence level. And if they struggle with formulating a sentence, it's an opportunity to support them with that. If they say it one way and it's not quite correct, you can model it the correct way. This is how children learn how to talk, right? When you have young children, they say, I go to the store, and you would simply say, I went to the store, and they learn.
Yeah. They do. You're absolutely right. I can remember my kids being little, or even students I've had that had, some speech issues like that. You don't point it out. You just model it for them, And
all they need. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's all they need, generally speaking. If there's a developmental language disorder, they're going to need more than that. But that's great.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about spelling.
I want to talk about spelling.
I know you do. I remember that from your email. So, okay, I'm going to give a little historical background. So, of course, I'm a therapist, and we work on spelling, just very controlled. I can remember, I want to say it was 2001. I was working in a nearby school district. And my students typically have to do spelling lists, and I'm not in love with it, but it's a thing. And I remember going to the new school I was at, and I said, okay, so tell me how I can support with the students mastering their spelling list, their weekly spelling list. And they go, oh, we don't give a spelling list. I go, and then I'm thinking in my head, great, they do something else. No, they didn't even instruct in spelling. And so flash forward 11 years later, I was driving past in the same city. I was driving past a McDonald's, and they had up on the marquee, try our sausage biscuits. And it was all misspelled, except try. Try was spelled right. Try our sausage biscuits. And I was like, there you go. This is our generation that they did not teach spelling to. And now they're at the McDonald's and they can't put the correct. And I don't think it was like the Chick-fil-A get our attention misspelling type of thing. I think that was a misspelling, and I even took a picture. I don't know where it is, but I even took a picture of it. But anyway, that's an aside. So how can people who are specialized in structured literacy, dyslexia therapy, how can we support the classroom teacher in spelling? Because that's hard. That's really, really hard to do.
Yeah, and that's a loaded question. I mean, there's going to be a lot of variables. So first of all, the mindset of the teacher. Do they want your help? And that's a big one, right? And so a lot of times initially it's just meeting them where they are. As you said, well, what are you doing and how can I help? Well, in that case, that doesn't go too far because they don't have even a weekly spelling test. But I would say building that rapport and that relationship so that over time you're helping whoever it is, the teacher, understand that. And I might say, well, I know you're concerned about reading, right? And you have some students who are struggling with your reading. Of course, yeah. Well, we know from research that if you use spelling, that can improve their reading. So if you use what's called a spelling approach to reading, it improves their reading. Can we try that at least with these students that you have who are struggling? So that can be a good way. It's a lot of, you have to read the room on that. But in terms of specific methods, so, there's probably a gazillion, but I'll take the weekly spelling test as one that you can tweak because that's pretty common still. You could work with the teacher to create a pattern. Hopefully there's a pattern in that list, whether it's the short vowel a or it's the TCH trigraph. And maybe, there's only one or two words, so you can bring in a few extra words. And so that the student has more exemplars in the pattern. But one thing I always am thinking, so I'm always back to this triple word form, but it's sounds, letters, and meanings. How am I integrating sounds, letters, and meanings for this student? What can I do? What can I tweak? So take the spelling test. A lot of students, the spelling list, a lot of students are supposed to memorize it, or their homework is to write each word 5 times. Right? Okay. Well, writing is a good thing. We know that writing and that process of actually encoding the word does facilitate the learning. So that's good. However, we need to have them saying the sounds when they write the letters. So if the word is spelled, take pip. So as they write the letters, they're saying p, I, p. So simultaneously saying the sounds with the letters. And then the meaning. So what I might do is if they have a list of words, I might say, well, okay, here's all your spelling words. First of all, let's read them. So great time to practice your reading. Now you're going to have to write them. I know you got to write them for your homework, but let's write them in order. Let's group them. So can you find all your words that are nouns? And this just is going to depend on your student and what you want to do. All the words that are nouns are all the words that are action words. So now you're starting to think about the meaning. And well, I don't know if that word is a noun or a verb. Well, let's use it in a sentence because as we know, a word isn't anything until it has a job in a sentence, right? So now we're getting into sentence formulation and syntax, modeling of syntax, and becoming meta-linguistic in the sense of, well, if I say the asp crawled out of the box, what do we think that asp is? The something crawled out of the box. Oh, well, it's a thing, so it must be a noun. So an asp must be a noun. And so now when they write asp, and they know it's a noun, they can use it in a sentence. So there's so many ways you could tweak an activity like that. But ideally, we're working with the classroom teacher and we're helping them understand. I can share this article you can put in your notes. I was asked to write an article for the Learning Difficulties of Australia organization for their bulletin a couple of years ago. And it's on a spelling approach to reading. So I review the research and I give some specific ideas in there. But I think it's important that we help all education stakeholders, from administrators to classroom teachers and everybody, realize that the current research, and again, this is the research that's going to take some time to make its way in, but we know that if you do encoding, spelling, good spelling, it transfers over to reading and it improves their reading skills. You could do good reading decoding instruction, and that's always a big if, right? Are they doing good decoding? But let's assume they are. You could do good decoding instruction and it doesn't generalize or it doesn't transfer much to spelling. And we've all seen these kids, right? We have them on our caseloads or in their classroom. Oh yeah, they're reading improved, but they're not spelling very well yet. Right. But it goes the other way. So helping teachers understand that. And I used to call it spelling, and now I just call it a different approach to teaching reading, or a spelling approach to teaching reading, or speech to print approach to teaching reading, because teachers are still going to be focused on reading, even though we know it's about reading and writing. But I'm very pragmatic. How can I just get in there and get it done?
Yeah. Oh, my
I
goodness.
love those ideas.
I do too. You can hear us both go, oh.
I'm going to start doing some of this stuff in my practice. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it's just interesting. I have an elementary education background. I've worked with dyslexic students for 14 years, and doing this podcast, I have learned so many different tips and tricks from all of you experts that come on, and it just shows you how much there is still more to learn all the time.
All of us are still learning. I am still learning every single day. It's true. There's so much to know and so much to learn. Yeah. Yeah. And I just also wanted to say a lot of these tips and tricks you'll find they come right out of our products, our spellings products. So we have a whole suite of products, and your audience might be interested. I mean, we have an entire spellings word study curriculum, but we even have spellings wordtivities and some of these kinds of more what I'll call light or ways to kind of work it into classroom instruction come out of wordtivities.
Okay.
So there are a lot of resources to go to as well.
Is this on your website, the SpellTalk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, SpellTalk is a discussion group. Yeah. So spell-links.com, or personally just learningbydesign.com is, I think, easier. But learningbydesign.com, it takes you to the same place. And you can see we have a whole suite of products, from word study curriculum to teaching strategy. We do teach strategies. Of course, we know we have to have skills, and then the strategies are about putting those skills. But we have 14 strategies for reading and spelling, and they relate to different phonological skills, different orthographic skills, but different morphological skills. So we develop the skills and explicitly teach the student how to use them. And then we even have tips for teachers, like if you ask a student to do something, of course, they don't always do what you want them to do, but how to redirect. So there's tips for how to redirect a student. You ask them to do X, they do Y, what do you say? That's in our spelling strategies by the numbers.
That's my favorite tip. That's my favorite thing, is when I see when the student makes this kind of error, you do this. When they do this, you do this. I'm like, oh, because, I always have those questions.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Okay, can we skip forward and talk a little bit about prosody?
About what? Prosody?
Prosody, yes. So I'm going to kind of go and tell a little bit of what I've noticed in my more informal noticing that happens in my practice. I've noticed that well-intentioned teachers are kind of teaching their students to read with expression. And I, in my practice, have my students that are still struggling to decode and blend words. So when they're going through this process, I notice that they're trying to read with expression, but they are just having to stop at this word, and then they're trying to decode it, and then they're like just doing this up and down and not really reading with expression and not really decoding words very well. Like, it's just a kind of a back and forth aerobic exercise. I just wondered, one, if you've noticed something similar, what do you recommend is a good accuracy rate keystone to introduce expression and or prosody?
So I have a whole different perspective on prosody, and I'll give you an article that you can link to. But again, I come from more of a clinical perspective and intervention. Prosody is more of the outcome. As you were saying, Melissa, right? If they can't decode, they can't read with prosody. So really prosody becomes the outcome. And it could be if they're a poor decoder. It could be if they don't yet have the automaticity. We've seen lots of students who can decode. They finally figured that out. They broke the code, but they're still not getting the automaticity.
Right.
They could have other language deficits. They could have a syntax deficit. They could have vocabulary deficits. So I approach it in terms of, if my student is not yet reading with good prosody, good inflection, whatever you want to call it. Why? What is the underlying cause? So I don't focus on the prosody, I focus on the cause, because when I remediate the underlying deficit or deficits, prosody has always come. I've never had to work. The most I've ever done is pretend you're reading to your little sister or a stuffed animal, and that kind of gets them into that mode. And whatever they're doing in the classroom, they're doing in the classroom. But that's only going to help the kids who are good readers and have good language skills. It's not helping the kids we see.
Right.
So I don't really care what they're doing in there, because, I'm remediating the deficits. Yeah. But yeah, so this article that was just published, Leslie Wade Woolley has done a lot of research in what she calls prosodic competence. So it's a metalinguistic skill, and it's a phonological skill. It's a type of phonological awareness skill that people don't even think about. And you could have prosodic competence or awareness of prosody at a word level or beyond. So at a word level, identifying syllabic stress. We all have worked with students who cannot identify syllabic stress. They speak just fine. So clearly their brain is hearing it fine and processing it fine. They're saying all the words correctly. They don't have the metalinguistic skill to identify which syllable is stressed or not stressed. So that's prosodic stress, prosodic competence or prosodic awareness at the word level. So that's something I would work on remediating if that's the deficit. And that becomes critical for spelling, because in order to spell, in order to apply a certain strategy or a certain set of strategies for spelling, you first need to identify, are you trying to spell a stressed vowel or an unstressed vowel? So that becomes important. But going beyond the word level, you also need to develop prosodic competence for prosody at a phrase level, at a sentence level. And this gets into, again, it's an awareness. If the student is speaking just fine, let's say you're having a conversation with them and they have normal prosody, then if you're asking them to read something, well, where's the breakdown? They have prosodic competence in speaking, but are they not metalinguistically aware of the syntax structure or the meaning of the word? Because if they don't understand the syntax, or if the sentence is long and they don't have the verbal memory, working memory to process that, they can't apply their prosodic competence. So that's a lot of ways to just say, I'm going to look at what is the language deficit that's interfering with the prosody. I'm going to remediate that, and the prosody will come. That's how I would approach it.
That's really great.
Yeah, and it was making me think of actually a couple of different places my brain was going to. So when we talk about the accented syllable or stressed syllable, that can also be important, just not for vocabulary reasons. If AR is unaccented, it doesn't say R, it says and it changes, how the word sounds. But if you talk about the unaccented syllable, or even with schwa, right? So that has some meaning to do with that too, those half-long vowels and all that. It can change the part of speech, depending on the, convict, convict.
Permit.
Yeah.
Permit.
Yeah. It can change the part of speech. But also where I was going to, I've actually already worked with students today. I got up early and got to my place and worked with students. This is my Sunday.
On a Sunday.
I know. You get them when you can. But I have a little boy, and his decoding is coming along great. And I've only had this happen to me twice in my career now. And here he is. It happened when I was a young teacher, and I just kind of didn't know what to do with it. And here's a new one. And he's reading and he's decoding. I can tell what he's doing. He's looking ahead to the next word, but his voice is still hanging on the last word. So it almost sounds like, I call it Baptist preacher. And then according, he's holding it out, but his eyes are looking at and I model it for him. And I don't want to call him out because I don't know if but at the same time, he needs to be aware of it. I don't know how to remediate that. That's what I'm trying to say, to help them become more prosodic.
So again, I'll say, well, why is he doing that? Is he doing that because he's still working on decoding and it hasn't come yet?
I think that's part of it. I do. I think that's part of it. I think his decoding is coming along, and now he's kind of moving along to the next word, but his mouth is still hanging on to the last word. His eyes are looking ahead to the next word. That's kind of how I see it.
I'm going to assume he doesn't have automaticity yet.
Right.
And so he's got a compensatory strategy that's buying him some time while he looks ahead and decodes that word.
Exactly.
Because he doesn't want to look like he can't decode
right.
it. So that's just a compensatory behavior. That has nothing to do with prosody.
Oh, okay.
Per se. I mean, it's changing his prosody.
Yeah.
But he's using it for a purpose. So this goes back to, I would say that once he sounds like his decoding has come in, but he doesn't have automaticity yet. I would say that once he has automaticity, he's not going to do that anymore, because he no longer needs that as a compensatory strategy.
Okay.
Now, that said, I had a student who, teaching decoding and sounding it out. So, son, son, son. And after a while, he kept doing it. And even words I knew he knew.
Yeah.
Well, I had to explicitly tell him, seriously, I had to explicitly say, if you know that word, you don't have to sound it out anymore. You can just say it. Honest to God, that's all he needed. He just needed to be explicitly told. And that behavior, which was clearly affecting his prosody and rate and everything else, just went away.
Wow.
He just didn't know. No one explicitly told him that once you can recognize a word, you no longer have to sound it out.
Wow.
So I think in your kiddo's case, he's got a compensatory behavior.
That's what it appears to me as well.
Yeah.
So would you say that you don't really teach prosody per se? You teach how to decode words, and you teach how to basically understand what words mean. You teach emphasis on how to put the correct accent on the correct syllable, and that is what leads you to a prosodic reading.
That, and if they have deficits in syntax, I've got to address that as well. Yeah, and working memory. If a student is reading a very long sentence, now we're talking older probably, but slightly older. If they've got a really long sentence that has complex syntax, it doesn't even have to be that long, but it's got complex syntax. Let's just go with that. It's not long, it has complex syntax. All their cognitive energy is going into that. So they're not going to be able to read with good prosody. They don't know what's coming next in the sentence. But even if they have good syntax and their working memory is low, they don't necessarily remember by the time they get to the next phrase what the first phrase was. So how are they going to use that meaning to drive the prosody on the second phrase? So there's, again, it's what's under the hood.
Okay. That's a nice analogy.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking too. That's
I like
good.
That.
A lot of times when we're both in private practice now, but even when we'd go to ARDS, used to be under 504s, but we don't do 504s any longer. So it used to be when we would be in ARDS or even in private practice settings, you have parents saying, what can I do to help my child? Mm-hmm. Let's say these are not educator parents, because a lot of educator parents have some good skills in place and they know what they can do with their child to support to an extent. But say you have the non-educator parent. What are things that we could supply them with to say, this is how you can help your child?
So 2 things there. First of all, I always talk to parents in my private practice, and I really emphasize that their job is to be a parent, and their job is not to be a teacher. And we know, especially when the children get older, their kids don't want them being involved. So I really caution them on that. That said, we talk about how I would like their role to be to support what I'm doing, whether that means to make sure their child completes an assignment or whatever that means, but to support and reinforce. They're not teaching, they're just reinforcing what I've already taught them. So that's kind of the big conversation or the big picture. But on specifics, and they do, they want to help, and there are little things. So I usually share these the very first day I meet with a child. And I could, of course, tweak them based on my initial meeting with that child. But generally, these are the ones I say. Have your child read out loud with you every day, or most days, right? 5 minutes. This is a long time of reading out loud.
Yeah, it is.
Be there to correct them. If they misread a word, don't say it for them. Don't tell them to sound it out. Tell them to look at the letters. Tell them to look again, because we know we have a lot of guess and go readers, right? And if they need help, sure, you could take your finger and underline the letters and sound it out. Make sure they're looking with you, or even better, have the child underline so the child's attention is on that letter, and you say the sounds to go with it and help them blend it. Those things parents can handle, the non-educator parents. I also say, when the kid is older, I say, I don't care what they're reading. I just want them reading out loud. If they want to read a newspaper article, if they want to read text from their friends, I don't care. I just want them reading out loud, right? Because what we know is that students who are poor readers are not necessarily activating their phonological systems. So they're looking at the letters and they're trying to make a direct connection from the letters, the printed word, to the meaning and the whole, the spoken word as a whole, but they're not necessarily engaging that phonological system and sounding out. So we want them reading out loud. The other thing I say is, as your student is writing, whatever they're writing, it's a card to grandma, or it's they're spelling words that they have to write 10 times, have them say the sounds as they write the letters. Always be saying sounds out loud as you're writing the letters. Those are really easy things to do, and those two things alone make a huge difference.
Nice. It is hard, and we're both parents, and I can remember doing the marathon homework sessions with my kids and we'd miss supper because we're sitting at the table trying to get the homework done because it had to be done the next day. So yeah, I think it's important to have your family time. The house needs to be a safe place for the child, someplace he feels successful.
100%. Yeah. His entire life is not just about reading and writing. There's so much more to that little person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So let's talk about AI. So AI is kind of going everywhere. How can it be used to support an educator in decoding, fluency, and even spelling?
Well, I'm aware that there are some products out there, and I haven't looked at one of them. So I know there are some things out there. The one I looked at, which was having a child read whatever was on the page and then giving that child corrective feedback, was really buggy. And I was surprised they actually released it. I saw it when it was still in development, and it isn't any better. I'm not going to name any product names there. So I would just say be careful, because giving wrong feedback is harmful.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And there was a lot. If there was one mistake on a page, I'd say, oh, okay, maybe. But there were quite a few, and they were pretty major. So I would say be very careful with what you choose. I personally, what I use AI for right now is, I'm a huge fan, I know you guys are too, of pattern focused, pattern loaded materials. Mm-hmm. So you can create. So I was doing a lesson on the word root SPECT, SPECT. Yeah. And I did some word level activities. So, and my word level activities, even though we're working on a word root, it incorporates phonology, orthography, and morphology. But now, of course, we've got to move to the sentence and the passage level. And it's hard to find pattern loaded materials with a particular word root in it. Right. So I call her my BFF, AI, ChatGPT. I said, give me a 4th grade passage about the gold rush using words that contain the word root SPECT. And it came back and gave me a beautiful passage about the gold rush. And there were probably 12, it was a 2-paragraph passage. And there were maybe 12 words in there with the word. So I was able to use that. Yeah. Now, it's really powerful. And I find it especially useful for word roots. Here's something to keep in mind, though. If you're working especially on some of those earlier patterns, TCH, whatever the pattern might be, you could do that, but the AI isn't controlling very well for other patterns in the words, nor is it controlling for syntax complexity, nor is it controlling for a lot. So you'll still need to do that to modify it for your students. We created spelling Swertivity's word lists. So these are word lists as well as sentences and passages that are pattern loaded. And we used AI to generate a first pass, but we had to go through and spend hours and hours and hours to modify it so that the sentence complexity was controlled, so that we don't have cognitive overload. Also, we made sure that other patterns, other words, did not contain patterns that our students would not have already had in our scope and sequence. So, right, if they're working on short vowel you really don't want to be introducing long E, or long E, whatever it might be. So we had to go through and we had to really spend a lot of time, woman hours, to make that happen. So there are, that is available, but I think you can also use AI if you have the time available to modify yourself. But that particular product is called Spellings Wordtivity's word list. So the Wordtivities I mentioned earlier, those are the different activities. There's all kinds of fun games. And then the Wordtivity's word lists are the word lists that they have a scope and sequence and are pattern loaded and go from K to grade 6. And even within a pattern, are organized by grade level. So you can have your students, who are maybe have more advanced vocab, you can give them some higher level vocab, but still controlling for the complexity of the patterns in the word. Anyhow, it's all very much controlled.
That's amazing.
I mean, I never thought about using AI for that. I sit there and I ask, all the time different questions, but I never thought about it for other areas like that. So that definitely gives me something to think about, because I had ideas going when I heard that just now. So we're getting ready to wrap it up. Our audience loves it when the guest recommends books or articles, or you've done great with the website, because I think, or even people who inspire you. So what are some recommendations for books, additional websites, articles, who inspires you to do what you do?
So I know I don't read books. First of all, I spend so much time on the computer and reading that when I'm done, I'm not reading books. But I do read, because I'm a geek, I read journals and journal articles. So my favorite go-to journal for research, and this gets back to the research, the science of reading, lowercase. Scientific studies of reading is, in my estimation, the best place to go for good reading and writing research. I personally like the articles too, because not only is it high quality research, but they're pretty digestible. They're not extremely long. And these days, that's about what my brain needs, is something shorter.
How often is it published?
I think
it's quarterly?
No, it's every 2 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I also read a lot, I mentioned earlier, for the SpellTalk listserv, as you know, because you're on there, we post a new research abstract Monday through Friday. Well, I've got to read the research abstracts, and sometimes I'll go and actually read the articles too. So I'm taking in a lot of information. So I don't really have a book to go to, but what I want to suggest, in addition to this and SpellTalk, is wherever you go, get vetted information. There's a lot on social media that is noise. It's not vetted. When I read some of the things there, I cringe. It's just wrong. So take that. I personally learn best when I'm engaged in a conversation, whether it's verbal like this or in writing. So in SpellTalk, and I can mention some other places too, but when there's a back and forth on a particular topic and becomes more of an analytical discussion, I find that really helpful. And we do have leading researchers on there, and you could get some really good information. I learn best these days, especially by, again, engaging in spoken language. So I belong to a couple of interdisciplinary groups, and I'm a huge proponent for this. So the PeaceNEX, I mentioned the PeaceNEX earlier, and some of my heroes, you asked who I admire, some of them are on there. So the PeaceNEX, we started, 5 years ago, and it's just a small group of colleagues, and it's interdisciplinary, and we're all very supportive of one another. And so I'll name names, and I'm sure you'll recognize many of them, but Marianne Wolf.
Oh, we just had her on.
Yep. Okay. So let me just say, and because you just had her on, she inspires me no end. She is so eloquent. She's brilliant, and she's just funny as all get out.
And I wish I could be her, just to be on the fly, say the things, and here's me not being Marianne Wolf, say the big words.
Right? She is phenomenal. So she's one of our PeaceNEX. Jen Hasbrook. I know you know this because they've been on. Margie Gillis.
Yeah, she was on too.
Yep. Janine Herron, who's a PeaceNEX, and I don't think you've had her on, but she inspires me in many ways. First of all, she organized. She's our leader, our inspirational leader. She got this group of PeaceNEX together, and she is 89 years old.
I was going to say we should round out the group, but she may not want to do this.
She is not stopping. I mean, this woman
really?
is traveling the world for literacy.
Okay. What is her name? Janine Herron?
Janine Herron. Yeah. And she's a huge speech to print advocate. She and I don't always agree on some of the nuances of how she approaches speech to print, but she's huge. And she started this group, and I give her a lot of credit. First of all, she brought David Kilpatrick recently joined us.
We just got him to agree to come on too.
So honestly, we get together and sometimes there's wine involved, but we have and we meet maybe once it used to be every month, and now it's every other month or so. And when we're at conferences, we get together and we have our private parties.
Yeah.
But first of all, it's a very supportive group. It's a brilliant group of researchers and scientists. But in addition to all of that, what I love about it is we're all experts, right? I mean, these are some big names.
Yeah.
We all know a lot. And yet there are a lot of nuances we're still hashing out and debating amongst ourselves. And this goes back to what Melissa said earlier. We are all still learning. When we get together, I just thought another name, Jane Ashby.
Oh,
she's at Mount St. Joseph's. She's on
I wanted to do my EDD there. I don't know how I'm going to manage that. But yes, Mount St. Joseph.
And she's co-authored with David Kilpatrick. There are others that, I mentioned Jan Hasbrook. Anyhow, so we get together and it is multidisciplinary. I am the only speech language pathologist in the group. And, they very much respect what I bring, just as I respect what they bring. And initially I joined kind of because I was the only SLP, and I felt like you can't have a group without having all the voices. Yeah. Margaret Goldberg. Do you know Margaret Goldberg?
I know the name.
Yes. So Margaret Goldberg she started out as a classroom teacher in California schools. I want to say Oakland. She's in the Oakland schools now. She started out as a classroom teacher, and now she's I won't get her title correct, but literacy coach. It doesn't matter. She's brilliant. And she has really taken a lead, and she's a huge advocate for literacy. She has a website called the Right to Read Project. And there's lots of great information on the Right to Read Project. One of the things she's hosting is something called Lunch and Lit. And Lunch and Lit actually has different roots through Barksdale Institute out of Mississippi, but they closed down after many years. They had a huge grant. And she now hosts Lunch and Lit. Lunch and Lit is where all these big names, and Hollis Scarborough has been there. Oh, wow. Marilyn Adams has been there. Louisa Moats, Linnea Airy. We all get together and we talk. And there's usually a presentation up front, first half hour or so. And then there's this discussion among some of the biggest brains in the world. And it's phenomenal if you just want to lurk and listen, which a lot of people do.
Oh my gosh,
but you will see that we're also sorting out some of these details too. So that's where I go to learn. So those are a few. It's a podcast. So it's called The Literacy View, Faith and Judy Literacy View. And Faith Borkowski.
I do know that name. I see her a lot. She does a lot of lives on Facebook.
Yeah, that I believe she does. Yeah. She is a fellow SLP, and she's brilliant, and she really knows her stuff. And she even has what she calls her bullshit button. She will call bullshit on, I don't care how big your name is. If you say something, then she knows there's research out there that isn't consistent with that. She's honking her BS button. So that's good, because again, I think we need to make sure we're really going to the people who are in the know and that are vetted, and she will vet. SpellTalk, we vet out there. Actually, we kind of self-vet, because if someone posts something that isn't quite
doesn't
right,
make it right, yeah.
We will. Okay, so if it's really bonkers, like snake oil bonkers, it won't get posted. We do moderate, but sometimes there are things that are kind of open to discussion. Well, you better have good research in your pocket. Right now, there's a discussion going on about Gestalt language processing.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tatiana, who really knows her research as well, another SLP, she's all over it. So you say anything in favor of it, she's calling you on the research and she's citing the research. And so you just got to kind of know your stuff. So we kind of all self-moderate there. But the last hero, and I have many heroes and people who inspire me, but I want to mention one more. Reed Lyon.
Yes. We love Reed, yeah. Like I
so
know him. I don't know him.
So, when I was at Northwestern, I did my master's and my doctorate at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and he was on faculty there at the time. Anyhow, so I know him more. I didn't take classes with him sadly, I was in speech language communication disorders. He was in LD, and at that time the departments didn't cross over a lot. They do now. They're very integrated. I did take some LD classes, not with him. I know Reed back then because we used to drink beer and shoot pool. All the faculty. So that's how I know Reed back then. However, of course, we all know what Reed has accomplished, and he was the person who came to Congress and testified in front of Congress and led to the reading panel. And so lots of reasons for him to be my hero, but most recently, he has come out of retirement from living off his fishing. Well, he doesn't live far. He's here in Florida. I'm in Florida now. Come out of retirement to become a voice in the lowercase science of reading, because he, of course, has always been supportive and part of the research that supports reading and writing. And he is now coming out to be part of the voice, one of the voices to continue to push forward on lowercase science of reading.
So when we went to IDA, we went to because it was here, it was out here.
It was in Dallas.
And we were there as the Dyslexia Duo. And it was like, it was like the Oscars.
Like the red carpet.
Yeah, it was like the Oscars for us. And we're like, Louisa Moats is over there talking to Reed Lyon, and there's Jan Hasbrook eating with Joan Sedita, and we're all going,
and they
we're
came by our booth?
They came, they did come to our booth. Reed Lyon didn't, because I don't think he knew we were back there. But, it was so exciting. It was so exciting to hear you talk about the PeaceNEX and the lunch bunch and all that, or not lunch bunch, but you know what I'm saying.
Lunch and list,
I feel like thrilled to be a part.
I know
of these
conversations
with you.
We're on that outer fringe, just kind of going, what are you saying?
we want to sit at the cool kid table.
So at IDA Dallas, you're talking about IDA Dallas.
Yes.
The PeaceNEX rented a room and had lunch together. And
I think you probably saw me walking by going, taking pictures.
We
just want to be at the cool kid table. That's all.
That's all. But did you go to the opening session when it was Reed Lyon and Margaret Goldberg who co-presented?
No, we didn't get to go. We had to stay at our booth.
That was, that was a mic drop moment, and I will forever remember it. It was Reed Lyon, so we talked about Reed, and of course we all know Reed, and it was Margaret Goldberg, who I told you about a minute ago. And the two of them were up there as researcher, scientist, and classroom teacher. She's so much more now, but that's where she started. And they just talked and they told their stories, and very honestly and candidly. And she talked about how as a classroom teacher, she was pissed as all hell when, they're trying to tell her how to teach reading based on science. And she's like, well, what do they know? And anyhow, and they tell their story about how they've come to better understand each other. And of course, now she teaches lowercase science of reading, but how they and he has a better understanding of the classroom teacher perspective. And it was beautiful, honestly. It was a tear. People were goosebumps, tears. It was a moment that will never be recreated. I hope it was recorded, and I hope.
Wow. I hope so too. I haven't thought about looking on the
YouTube.
website. Well, look on the website. Don't they put the videos for IDA on there? I think so.
I was trying to find some of those, and I couldn't find them, but.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I think you put it correctly. We're just lurking with our trays, circling, y'all. We want to sit at the cool kid table, but we're not ready yet.
Look at you, though. You're doing these podcasts with all the
cool kids.
All the cool kids.
Yeah,
cool kids.
all the cool kids.
This is how we get in. We find our way.
And the great thing is I'm learning so much along the way. I'm implementing more and more with my students, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity. I'm just so grateful. So thank you for taking your time to meet with us and share your expertise. And then my final question, Amy always says this is my favorite question.
She's very, I don't want the phrase touchy-feely. That's not it. You meet the social, emotional, you get a little deeper, whereas I'm like, I need the numbers. I'm touchy-feely at times, but I need the numbers and stuff.
I'm more, compassionate.
I'm compassionate.
Yes, you do. Okay. We're going to hurt each other's feelings if we talk too much. No, just kidding. If you had one wish that you could grant for our students, what would it be and why?
Well, the obvious one is to wave my magic wand and they can all read and write magically, right? So that's an obvious one. But I guess I have then two. One is I really do wish there was some way for each student to have access to individualized, good quality instruction with a well-qualified instructor, because it works, right? We see it when we work with our students one-on-one. In the research, we see it. So good quality instruction provided by a well-qualified provider works. And I just wish all students had access to that. And there are a gazillion reasons why they don't. So I just would love if that could happen. And I also just wish that and we can help them with this, but they know that they are much more than, a child with a reading or writing problem. And that's just one part. And there's so much more to them, and they're so special in so many ways. And I just want them to know that. And sometimes I don't want to go too far off topic because I want to stay with that touchy-feely part, but sometimes I'll share with my students about reading and writing was invented by man hundreds of years ago. And you know what? If you were born before that, you would not have had dyslexia. You would not have had any problems with reading and writing. You would have, you'd be just this perfectly happy, successful person. It's us that we created this system of reading and writing that there's nothing wrong with your brain. It's just that we created a system that isn't matching your brain. And I just want them to understand there's nothing wrong with them. It's the system. So,
I think that's beautiful.
I do too. And I love that perspective. And a lot of times that's why this question is really neat, because you get to hear how other people perceive what their work, what their life's mission is, what their work is, and how that plays into their students and what that gives to other people so that they can go forward and make a difference in other people's lives as well.
Yeah, I really love the question. I will say it's the first time I had more of a touchy-feely question in all the interviews I've done.
We're the yin and yang.
I love it. I was like, oh, that's cool. So no, I'm really glad you asked it. And I'm kind of go touchy-feely myself quite a bit. And it actually just kind of reignited some passion for the students.
Awesome.
Sometimes we all get caught up in our busy days.
Right.
And if I'm not always with students, and I can sometimes forget about how much that, means to me, and then of course to them.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
This has been so fun.
It's so, but I always get a little intimidated when I have to go into these, because y'all are the experts, and I'm like, I'm going to say some, excuse my mouth, dumbass thing. And they're going to think, oh my gosh, who am I talking to? But you have explained things to us in such a way that it's easy to grasp. Mm-hmm. And we really, really appreciate your time with us.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity, because the more people can hear and know and learn and grow, the better it is for all of our students.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun talking about the things that we love.
It is.
Right?
It is. It really is. Yeah, no, I hope you keep doing it. It sounds like you will keep doing what you're doing, not just with your students, but with the podcast and really making differences in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we can have you back someday too.
Yeah.
I'd like that. And I missed you at IDA last year. So are you going to, I don't know yet if I'm going, but are you going to be at IDA?
The national one? I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
I don't know where the next one is. I mean, it was easy. It was in our backyard this last time.
Right. And it's a big mystery, because I've been trying to find out. My colleague usually by now they announce it. And you guys, I know you're going to cut all this out, but usually by now they announce it and they haven't. A colleague told me yesterday she thought maybe DC, but I don't know how.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah. I mean, we just want to get out of Texas.
Wherever it is, if I'm there, I will definitely connect with you.
That would be great.
You do a booth there?
Yes.
Yeah, we did like man on the street type of thing. So my husband came, and the hope is that whatever we do next, he'll be able to come, because his schedule has changed. And yeah, we did live podcasts like we were talking about. We had Nancy Mather was like an early person who said, kind of a big name, who said she'd do a podcast with us. And then we saw her at IDA and she came and just did a little snippet. And then while she was interviewing, Louisa Moats walks up. And I was like, wasn't expecting that. And in fact, you can hear on the live pods, you hear me go, oh my gosh.
Celebrity alert!
It really was. It was like the Oscars for us, out there with our nice clothes, eating popcorn, just kind of watch it.
So now we're going to have even more celebrity sightings.
Yeah, hope so.
All these others that we've met along the way. So we'll be looking for you. If it is in DC, we'll be looking for you. And we're going to are you going to I don't think you're part of ALTA.
Well, she might go to ALTA.
Would you go to the ALTA? Would you go to ALTA?
Because that's here in the state too.
I would normally go. I haven't gone much in the past. Right now I'm not traveling as much, and so I'm even a little on the fence about IDA.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
I had a blast. So thank you again for the opportunity. And really, it was a pleasure meeting you. And I still can't get over how old all you are. Seriously, when you first logged on, I'm thinking, they're probably in their early 30s.
Oh, nice. Thank you. No, I'm turning 57.
And I'll be 50 this year.
I really don't. So yay
but
for
I've got a filter on too, so.
Yeah, well, I can only do so much. Anyhow, you guys are a blast. I had fun.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. We really appreciate your time. Bye.
The Dyslexia Duo hosts are Melissa Dean
and Amy Rodenroth. The producer is Greg Rodenroth.
Dyslexia awareness is so important. Please share with your friends, family, and anyone who needs to know more about dyslexia.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at The Dyslexia Duo.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.